Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes.
Is there anybody out there that wants to roll? And is there anybody out there that wants to boogie? Tonight, live from the Apollo, Glasgow.
Well, if you're looking for trouble, I'm the man to see. If you're looking for satisfaction, it's satisfaction guaranteed. I'm as cool as a body on ice, hotter than the rolling dice. Send you to heaven, or take you to hell. I ain't fooling, can't you tell? I'm a live one.
Welcome to Glasgow Apollo Live with Scott and Andy.
Good evening, how are we doing? And welcome to another edition of Glasgow Apollo Live with me, Scott MacArthur, in the cold Cotswolds.
And me in wet and cold Sydney.
Is it wet and cold in Sydney? It's not wet and cold in Sydney.
Sunny and warm.
How are you doing, everybody? I can imagine quite a lot of people are hacked off tonight because the Genesis gig got cancelled. Which is a shame. Some of the band got the old COVIDs, so hopefully we all gain from a few of you that were meant to be elsewhere. But tonight's show, what are you saying, mate? Sorry,
I didn't know that.
They did. They cancelled it. I think it was last night or earlier this morning. I can't remember, but it's off. So it's it just said some of the band had COVID. So. Anyway, so welcome to the show. It's a really special show this week because we're going to be joined by the one and only Billy Sloan, who'll join us after we have a wee chat about the socials and what's been happening. It would be nice if you're a first-time listener and viewer, if you could say hello and tell us where you're tuning in from. It would be terrific. We always like to see where in the world people are tuning in from. As always, the show will be repeated. It will be on on Sunday at 12 o'clock. For those of you who I've got another concert. A couple of folk have texted me saying they've found some various cover bands that are on in Glasgow tonight. So there's a few folk going to other gigs rather than the Genesis gigs. So and there's an Undertones gig tonight as well in the city. So there's quite a lot happening tonight. So anyways, what have you been listening to this week, mate?
I have been listening to a lot of Badfinger.
Badfinger?
Yeah.
What brought that on?
Well, they're playing this week in the Apollo. And I gave them a good thrashing, a good listening to. So they were very good. I like them. I like them a lot.
I don't really know them at all, mate, to be honest.
Terrible history of mismanagement and suicide and awful. But they did play. They played. They supported. Who did they support? Anyway, we'll find that out later, maybe. But the very good band. Oh, who else? Todd Rundgren. I listened to him. Never listened to him before in my life, on purpose. But I liked it. Initiation. A lot of people. I think it's called Initiation. Everyone was hating on it when I put up the post about the ticket. A few people were hating on it, but yeah. Great album. Loved it. It was Frank Zappa-esque-ish musical.
Right, okay.
Like a musical, rock musical type concept album. I loved it. It was great.
Yeah. Well, do you know how we were talking?
I didn't get to Steel Eye Span though. So.
Yeah, not my cup of char. But I got to. I was trying to. I'm playing this constant catch up with all these bands that I didn't see in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And
actually, me too.
I've been listening to the new Tears for Fears song. I don't know if you've heard that yet.
No, mate. I'm mired in the.
It's all right, actually. They're getting more and more proggy as they go on. I mean, the lyrics were always quite sophisticated, but the music's matured. And it's a good song, actually. I was quite impressed with it. Good song. And I was also listening. I mean, I've been listening to some quite obscure, like a band called Life Signs, who are a sort of prog super group, if you like, but brilliant new album, beautiful album, really beautiful album.
I did listen to. I'm looking down my list here. I did listen to lots of bands actually. The Skids, the Stranglers,
There was a lot this week, wasn't there? So.
Big Country. I listened to AC/DC concert from October the 8th.
Yeah, we might hear some more of that
92.
later on, I suspect. But anyway, so tonight, what we'll do, folks, we're just going to start with a quick review. I'm giving Andy a warning here. He doesn't know what he's doing yet. A quick review of what's happened on the socials, because it's been mad again, unbelievable. And thanks for everybody who responded to that wee story that I told earlier on today. I'm absolutely blown away by it, to be honest. The response has been fantastic. So literally hundreds of people. So quite amazing, absolutely amazing. But so anyway, mate, what's been happening on the socials this week? What's been happening?
Well, this week we have 10,082 members. Thank you once again, which is amazing. We've got 63 or maybe 64 members this week, new members, and there was 6,930 active members.
Goodness gracious.
On the posts, 77 posts, 1,804 comments, and 4,500 reactions. So that has been a good week. Yeah, it's been a great week. Thank you very much for posting and liking and subscribing and joining up. If this is your first time viewer, I'm going to say it. Sorry for watching, but this is the best we've got. This is the best we do. There's no more. It doesn't
We've got a broadcaster on tonight that knows what he's doing, but never mind.
Oh, he'll show us up then. He'll know.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, we've got people. We've got now. I think that might be Chris tuning in. He's saying he's in his caravan. If that's you, Chris, hello. How you doing? If it's not, whoever you are, thanks very much for coming in. There's James saying Todd Rundgren was a better producer, and I like his bands, the Nas and Utopia. Utopia were pretty good actually. I quite liked them as well. Doug's here. Hello, Doug. Good to see you again, mate. Hope it's okay over there in the States. We've been getting daily reports from John McCalman about Las Vegas this week, all over the group. So that's been quite good fun. There's somebody saying about Badfinger, mate. Started out in the 60s as the Ivies. Did they? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Great band they were too. Obviously I know a couple of their songs, but it's not a band that
they've got. I was listening to this. There's a song that you listen to it, and if you don't know who wrote it, you don't know who produced it, you go, well, that's Paul McCartney, isn't it? And then it is. It was Paul McCartney. He wrote it, produced it. Brilliant song. Come and Get It. Oh,
Come and Get It. Great song. It's a brilliant song.
And yeah, brilliant songs. I had a wee chat with one of our schoolmates online, Tony Higgins. He was saying that he's always wanting to have. It would be great if Liam Gallagher could do a song called Sweet Tuesday Morning. And I was like, all right, okay. And then I listened to it. Yeah.
Really?
He could, yeah, he could do that. It's right up his street. Beatlesque. Excellent. Oasis-ish. Yeah, great song. Did
you ever watch that recording of the wee man at playing at Reading? The Oasis.
This year?
This year, yeah. It was absolutely. It was comedic because the kids didn't know who he was. I mean, it was hilarious. I mean, he was getting really irate because he was saying next one, blah blah, and the crowd are going, "Who the fuck is this guy?" You know. It was absolutely hilarious, and you can see his ego bleeding out of his head. You know, he just couldn't cope with it.
I think he would be able to handle that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And of course, somebody said over on Facebook that Badfinger signed to Apple. That makes sense given the Beatles links, doesn't it? So, and without further ado, we're going to have our guest on tonight. Let me take these things off the screen. I'd like you to welcome Mr. Billy Sloan to the show. Billy, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's really nice to be here.
It's lovely for you, and we really appreciate you joining us. It's as you probably see from the chat, we've got people in from all over the world. We've got the States, we've got Spain, Holland, we've got Melbourne, and we've even got Oban So there's a fair old mix here tonight, Billy. So thanks very much for coming onto the show. And can I just ask, I mean, just to get you going, because I'll just let everybody know, I had a chat with Billy a few days ago, and honestly, I think we spoke for over an hour, and it just went like that, and I hardly asked him any questions. He just went off like a firework. So, Billy, you've set it up for that tonight, mate. But what's your and one of the things we do, Billy, is we're trying to get everybody to record their best memory about the Apollo. Right, we're trying. It's almost like getting the autobiographies of the crowd that visited the Apollo. So, what's your best memory, the greatest moment you ever experienced at the Glasgow Apollo, Billy?
Well, I think it's got to be the first one. I went to my first ever gig on the 21st of October, 1971, and it sounds really dramatic to say it, but it was a life-changing moment. I mean, the reason I'm sitting talking to you right this second, after 45 years as a music journalist and a broadcaster, stems back to that night. For somebody who's spent their entire working life, writing about music and commentating on music, I was a bit of a late developer. I didn't buy my first record until I was 15. Now, when you think of kids now, like my granddaughters have got, 10,000 songs on their phone or on their laptop, or they sit and watch YouTube, or they sit and watch, they sit and listen to Spotify. But of course, in 1971, you didn't have that. And the reason that I never bought my first record until 1971 was quite simply that we didn't have a record player in the house. So there wasn't any point in me buying an album because I had nothing to play it on. And then all that changed in the summer of 1971. I went away with the Boys Brigade. I was a big, active member of the 200th Boys Brigade in Springburn. And we went away to Wales, Rhyl in Wales. And I virtually spent my entire 2-week camp money, my pocket money. I'm proud to say I went into Woolworths in Rhyl in Wales, and I bought The Who Live at Leeds. That was the first album I ever bought. And then I bought Won't Get Fooled Again, which was the single which had just been released from Who's Next on the blue picture sleeve. Right. And I was almost spontaneously combusting because I just couldn't wait to get back to Glasgow. Although I was having a good time at the BB camp with all my mates, I couldn't wait to get back to Glasgow to play my first 2 records. And because I never had any money, for about the next, 3 or 4 months, that was the only records I had because, we had a lot of people won't even know what I'm talking about, but my mother bought this thing called a radiogram from Arnott Simpson's at the corner of Jamaica Street and Argyle Street. And it was a bit like a kind of like a small cabinet, and then the right hand side you opened up a lid and there was a turntable where you could play records at 45 or 33 or 78, and then the left hand side there was a cabinet where you could store your records. And for about the first 3 or 4 months I only had that one single and one album, so I was a bit of a late developer. But then spin on a few months and the Who were coming to play at the Greens Playhouse in October of 1971, and I had to beg, and I mean beg, my old man to let me queue out overnight in Sucky Hall Street for tickets, because the tickets, the Greens Playhouse didn't have a box office. The tickets were sold from a place called the House of Clydesdale, which was an electrical shop at 160 Sucky Hall Street. If you walk out of Watson's bookshop and cross the street, almost where Marks and Spencer's is, that's exactly the spot that it was. If you wanted to buy a ticket for any gigs that were on at the Greens Playhouse, you walked in there, and there was past the vacuum cleaners and the fridges and the washing machines and that kind of stuff, and at the back there was a couple of wee women who sat at a table, and we queued out overnight. Sucky Hall Street wasn't a pedestrian precinct, there was still traffic running up and down, and they opened the doors at 9 o'clock in the morning, and there was a bit of a stampede, and we managed to get in and buy tickets to go and see the Who. And I went to see them on that night, and it was a game changer for me because from that second on there was never enough hours or minutes or seconds in the day to listen to records or go to gigs. And I, like everybody else, probably like the two of you, I mean, I wanted to be a swivel hip rock star like Robert Plant or Roger Daltrey or Mick Jagger or something like that, but I was kind of realistic enough to know that I didn't have the talent for that. So I thought, I'm going to try and get into the music, but I'll do it in a different way. And I chose journalism. So as I say, that's why I'm sitting here just now. I mean, seeing Roger Daltrey, Pete Townsend, John Entwistle and Keith Moon on that 25-foot high stage on that night was just like a game changer, an absolute game changer for me. That's the reason that I ended up having a career in music journalism.
Fantastic. And from that night, what do you remember? Do you remember anything? I mean, I know we're all getting on a bit now, and it's a long time ago, but what do you remember?
I remember it. I remember every single thing about it, every single detail, almost with forensic recall. The thing about the Greens Playhouse was I'd never ever been in it when it was a cinema. So the first time I ever stepped foot over the threshold was on the 21st of October 1971. My ticket was 85 pence. And me and a mate of mine, a guy called Freddie Underwood, we got tickets for row C, seat number 31, 32. So you were right down the bottom of the stalls, over to the right-hand side. And what I remember about it was that, when you saw the Apollo, I think, as I said to you the other day, if you were standing at the lane at Renfield Street and you walked along the lane to where the stage door was, where the concert hall is now, it took you maybe about, 15, 20 seconds to do that. But from the moment you went through the door of the Greens Playhouse and the guy checked your ticket to make sure you had a ticket for the gig, it was almost like going into Doctor Who's TARDIS. There was it seemed huge. It seemed to take you about 40 minutes to get from the front door down to your seat or up to your seat in the balcony, wherever you were sitting. Because if you remember when you walked in, there was a kind of little box office bit in the middle where they sold the cinema tickets. But there was a stair on the right and a stair on the left, and that took you down to the stalls, and you get your ticket checked again. But if you went up the middle stair, there was 3 doors, one in the middle, one in the left, one in the right, and that's where you went into the balcony. And of course, the first 10 rows or something were the famous golden divans, which were a wee bit more expensive than the bog standard balcony seats. And I remember everything about it. Nobody was really interested in watching the support band in those days, but it was a band called Quiver, and even that was a big deal. The volume and the amplifiers, and guys with guitars and drum kits and stuff. I'd never seen a band in that setting before. And then, of course, when the Who came on stage, it was mind blowing. I mean, it was absolutely mind blowing. There was Roger Daltrey 30 feet away from me, a guy I'd only ever heard on record or seen in the pages of Melody Maker or NME or Record Mirror or Sounds. And there he was, and there was Pete Townsend with his boiler suit on and his guitar, and there was Keith Moon, and there was John Entwistle. And at one point, I think it was maybe because the ticket sales for that gig were so crazy that they added a second show a month later, the 9th of November 1971, and I managed to get tickets for that as well. And at one of the 2 shows, it might have been the second one, I can't remember, Townsend was smashing a guitar and halfway through a song near the end of the show, and he threw it into the audience, and it landed in the row that we were sitting in. So it may have been the first one, and I remember getting a splinter of wood off his guitar. But my mate Freddie Underwood, he was quite a big guy and could handle himself. He ended up in a kind of tug of war with this guy for his guitar strap. It was this kind of embroidered guitar strap, and he managed to get the guitar strap, and he had it for years. And then I think his mother chipped it out or something like that. He lost it, and he had it. But it was, and then of course, they were promoting Who's Next. That was the album they were promoting at the time, and the single from it was Won't Get Fooled Again, which was the first record I bought. For a headline band, the first 2 songs I heard live for a headline band were Can't Explain and Substitute. I mean, that was the first 2 songs I heard from a band headlining a gig. And I mean, what a place to start. And then, of course, at the end of the show, when they were singing Won't Get Fooled Again, it was the kind of long 7.5-minute version as opposed to the 3.5 single edit. They had the green laser beams coming out from the back of the stage over the heads of the audience. I mean, you'd never seen anything like that before. It was like, something had come down from the moon. It was fantastic. It was incredible, really. Yes. I can remember every single detail of it. It's never left me, and that was 1971.
Gosh, it's funny that, because we quite often have conversations on here about how things have changed, but I'm not sure they have changed that much. It's just that we had never seen these things before, I think. When you first see a band live in that sort of environment, it's like, Jesus Christ, and there's so many gigs now, the whole music environment has changed. So it's quite interesting. That's a good memory. And
I remember when I worked, before I get into journalism, I worked as a labourer for the old Glasgow Corporation. and just labouring in building sites, mixing cement and carrying bricks and emptying rubbish out of old buildings and stuff like that. And we get paid every Thursday morning, so you went into this little office in George Street, just round the corner from the City Chambers, and you went up and you signed the book and you showed ID, and a guy behind the glass counter slid your little brown envelope, your little your wage packet, and that was your weekly wages. And I remember vividly, slap bang in the middle of the Apollo, it would have been the early 70s, about maybe 74, that one Wednesday night, the only money I had was 10 pence, my bus fare to work that morning. Then the following morning, I didn't have any other money at all. I had only 10 pence to my name. That was my entire, riches on that Wednesday night, because I was going into work in the Thursday morning to get my weekly pay packet. And while I only had 10 pence in actual money, in the drawer of my room, I had about 35 quid's worth of tickets for up and coming concerts. Now, in those days, a ticket was maybe £2.75 or something like that. And I had tickets for Sparks, Roy Wood's Wizard, Slade, Alex Harvey, Roxy Music, all that. So I had about 35 quid's worth of tickets, but I only had 10 pence to get the bus in to get my wages the next morning. And I thought that was a pretty good deal.
Not too bad. And then you told me something I had never heard you speak about before the other day, that you actually worked at the Apollo.
Yeah, I mean, after that first gig, the first gig I went to was The Who, October 21, 1971. And then I was lucky enough to get tickets for, the added date, which was the 9th of November, 1971. And then the next gig I went to, I'm very proud to say, and the next record I bought Free Live, the live album that they'd recorded on their 1970 UK tour. I think they recorded it in Newcastle and Croydon or something like that. And when you bought it, it was like an airmail envelope, and the stamps, instead of being postage stamps, it was Paul Rodgers and Simon Kirke and Paul Kossoff and Andy Fraser. So that was the second album I bought. And then the success of that album, they kind of split up when that album was released, and the success of that album persuaded them to kind of get back together again and give it another whirl. So they came to the Greens Playhouse on the 24th of February 1972. Can you believe the ticket was 40 pence? 40 pence. And I don't know who was printing the tickets, but he made a mistake, and on the ticket it said, you've got one on your website, it said the free. It wasn't free, it was the free, right? Which he made a mistake. So that was the second gig I went to. But then I knew a guy who worked as a steward in the Greens Playhouse, and I said, how do you get a job? He says, come down, there's a gig coming up, come down. So I went down to the Greens Playhouse, about I think it was about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I went up to you went up the stairs to the foyer as if you were going into the balcony, but then you did a sharp right, and there was a big room up there. I think it was called something like the Windsor Room or something. It was a big, huge room, and there was a guy in there. There was two guys, but I remember one of them was a guy called John Fallon. He had the black suit and the white shirt and the dicky bow tie. He was the sort of head of the stewards for the balcony, and then they had another guy who was the head of the stewards for the stalls. And you didn't get paid around like that, you never get paid. You were just there to work as a steward and show people their seats and check their tickets and and that kind of thing. But what it was you got this sort of armband thing, white armband that said steward on it, with black letters, and that was like the Willy Wonka golden ticket, because that meant you could get into the place to see the gig. So when you stood up to dance to Rory Gallagher and the Golden Divans, I was the annoying steward who shone a torch in your face and told you to sit down, and you told me to piss off and completely ignore me. But I just wanted this armband thing, because that got you into the gig. And I mean, and it was great. I mean, I remember I saw Chuck Berry, saw Status Quo a few times. I saw Elton John. I saw Hawkwind. I saw Farron Young, the country singer. I saw Peter Gabriel, Genesis. I saw Brian Eno era Roxy Music. So, I mean, sometimes there was 3, 4, 5 gigs a week in the Greens Playhouse, and I went to them. I mean, if somebody good was on, like Slade, everybody turned up to work as a steward. But then if it was Farron Young, the country singer, that nobody really fancied, 10 people would turn up. But I just turned up at every gig, irrespective of who was on. I just wanted to go to a gig. I just wanted to be there. I just wanted to be part of the atmosphere. I just wanted to be part of that audience. I just wanted to be in that hallowed place, you know, irrespective of who was on stage. And that was how I saw Wings there as well. McCartney came pretty early on, and I saw Wings there, and I saw a whole bunch of people there. But it was great. As I say, there was some weeks I was in the place 3, 4, 5 nights a week, and it was brilliant, absolutely fantastic.
Magic. Before we, I want to talk to you about some of the bits and pieces that you've shown me, which are amazing. A couple of folk are just saying hello. Somebody over on Facebook saying, love listening to Billy's Sunday mornings here in Melbourne.
Hi, Melbourne.
My dad's good friend Brian Kennedy is Billy Sloan's cousin. Shout out to my dad and Brian himself. There you go. That's from James. And so you've got some people who know you quite well here, I think, Billy. So the next thing that we were talking about that I thought was amazing was one of the things that Andy and I have been trying to do is encourage everybody over the year now. We've nearly been going almost a year. To bring out their old like artifacts, things they've got from the Apollo, like chairs and clothes and God knows what. You know, we've seen what we've seen, Andy. We've seen bits of Ozzy Osbourne's shirt. We've seen drumsticks and all the usual stuff. But we've had bricks and we've had stories, mythical stories. And actually, Billy's got a clue about one of the stories that we've been talking about for months, and I'll come back to that, Billy, the book, the signing book. But Billy's got loads of stuff. So, Billy, can I just? I mean, I'm going to if I get you going, and the one that I love is this one. It's the big hunk of carpet that you've got from Green's Playhouse. I mean, look at that, guys. What's the story behind that?
Well, the story about the carpet is that when the Green's Playhouse chain of cinemas opened across the country, because there was one in Glasgow and I think there was one in Edinburgh and then all throughout the country, was that they got a sort of bulk order of this carpet made. I think it was first put down on the floors of the theatres in 1936. So you can maybe get somebody to check that. And as it was Green's Playhouse, named after the Green family, the carpet said, it's good, it's Green's. It was 2 bits of carpet, and when you put them together, it said it's good on one side and it's Green's the other side. And when you put them together, as you can see now, it was it formed that. Now, once upon a time, I think it must have been about the maybe late 70s, early 80s, one of the guys who was the manager of the Apollo was a very nice guy called Bob Saville, who I got to know pretty well. He was a nice guy. And he said, there's some of this carpet line up the back stair. And what happened was that in 1973, when the Green's Playhouse, 1974, when did it become the Apollo? Was it 73 or 74? 73, right? When it morphed from being the Green's Playhouse 73 into the Apollo, in the middle of that year, they looked at renewing the carpet. Unicorn Leisure looked at renewing the carpet. And they quickly discovered that to do it for the entire place was going to cost like £1 million or something like that. And it just was not cost effective. It was just too cost prohibitive. So what they decided to do was, as this carpet had been made away back in 1936 and it had taken a lot of kind of footfall over the years, it was pretty hard wearing, because I think a carpet made in 1936 would be very different to a carpet made in 2021. And so what they decided to do was that it was still in a pretty good state of repair. It hadn't been threadbare or torn or ripped or anything like that. So what they decided to do was, rather than trying to rip it all out, and goodness knows what you'd have found under the carpet, with floorboards and goodness knows what, they decided that as the carpet was still intrinsically still pretty good condition, that they would just dye it burgundy. So they dyed the whole of the carpet, right through the stalls, right through the circle, right up the side stairs, the whole place. They dyed it burgundy. Now, if you knelt down and shone a bright light on it, you could just about make out that it's Green's underneath where they dyed it. But you'd need to have had your nose pressed up against it. And Bob Saville said there's a couple of rolls of the original carpet. They've just been lying up there for years gathering dust. If you want them, take them. But of course, much as I'd love to have taken them, I never really had any place at home to store a couple of, rolls of carpet. It was just impractical. So what he did was he said, well, take a bit of it then. So I went up one day with a Stanley knife and physically cut 2 sections off it, put it in a black bin liner and took it up the road, and I've had it ever since. And it's never been down on the floor. It's in absolute mint condition. There used to be a guy, there was a London-based promoter called John Curd way back in the 70s, and he took a roll of it in one of the trucks one day back to London, and he carpeted his office out with it, but I don't think that'll exist anymore. And then there was a Scottish Film Archive office up in the West End of Glasgow, and they had their office carpeted in it, but I don't even think that exists anymore. You were telling me the other day that you heard that Rod Stewart had a games room, which was in the carpet. I'm sure he did at the time, but I don't think that will have exist anymore, because he would probably have moved to a different mansion by this time. So there's not an awful lot, if any, of the carpet still around. And I gave they had an exhibition about 2-3 years ago at the National Museum of Scotland called Rip It Up, this sort of the history of Scottish pop. And they asked me for some exhibits to loan them for the exhibition. And one of the things I gave them a loan of was the carpet, and they put it in a big glass case. And I mean, it was really popular because everybody had heard about it, but they'd never seen it. So, they got to see it for real. And as I say, there can't be any bits of it or many bits of it still in existence. But the 2 bits I've got are mint condition because they've never been on a floor and nobody's walked across them.
Brilliant. Yeah, the Rod Stewart story was in a magazine. I think it was Playboy magazine, Andy, if you can remember. But I think
see,
it was.
I didn't read magazines like that.
Need to see a picture.
He just looked. He just looked.
I didn't read magazines like that. I was reading Being on the Dance. There you go.
Of course
Like
not.
you'd be reading NME and Sounds, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I used to go to work on the building sites, you'd come down on a Wednesday, and Sounds came out on a Wednesday, and I bought it from a wee newsagents called Cameron's at the bottom of Balgrey Hill Road, just at the bottom of Balgrey Hill Road in Springboro. So you would buy Sounds on a Wednesday, and you would read that, and then on a Thursday, you would get NME, New Musical Express, Melody Maker, and Record Mirror. So you bought the 3 of them. So it would take you like a week to read them all, and then before you knew where you were, it was the next Wednesday, and Sounds was back out again. So I bought the 4 main music papers faithfully, week in, week out, year in, year out, for God knows how long.
Yeah. And that was the only place you could find. You could find out who was playing the next week.
Aye.
That's right, because that was the only reason. That was the only way you knew who was coming up, because there was no internet and there was nothing like that, and the promoters didn't take adverts in any of the papers, so you were relying on Melody Maker to say Roxy Music are touring, here are the dates, and then as soon as you knew what the dates were, you legged it down to the box office and hoped the tickets weren't sold out, and you could manage to get a couple of them.
Aye.
Yeah.
And tell us, how did you go from being, a bricky's mate to being a steward to then getting into the broadcasting business, Billy? How did that happen?
Well, I always wanted to get into journalism, but it was a bit of a kind of closed shop back in the mid-70s. To work for a paper, you had to be a member of the National Union of Journalists. But to become a member of the National Union of Journalists, you had to work for a paper. So it was a bit kind of catch-22. So I lived in Springburn at the time, which is in the north of Glasgow, a pretty working class area. And there was a local paper called the Springburn Times. There was the Springburn Times in Springburn, and there was the Bishopbriggs Times in Bishopbriggs, which was about 1.5 miles up the road. And I wrote away to the Bishopbriggs Times, the editor. I didn't know who the person was, and said, look, I read the paper every week. I get the paper every week. I noticed that you don't have a music column. I'll write one for you for free on the condition that you put my name on it. So if I write a story about, going to see the Who, you put by Billy Sloan. Or if I do a review of Free Alive, you put by Billy Sloan. And my way of thinking was that if I was going to try and get a job in a newspaper, that was my ambition, that if I could build up a sort of cuttings file, and then I could go to a prospective employer, and if he'd said, if you get any experience, I could say, well, here's a lot of my published articles. So just by sheer coincidence, the woman who was there, it was a lady who's still a very good friend called Nina Young, and she was just one of these real kind of bright sparks. She was a real kind of the life and soul of the party. She was so enthusiastic, and it just so happened that they were looking for a reporter to cover the Springburn area, which is where I lived. And
Right.
she invited me up for an interview, and more or less offered me the job on the spot, as a reporter for the Springburn Times. Now, that was great. It was fantastic. The only problem was that, I was working, on the building sites, and you were getting, 3-4 nights overtime. When you worked at weekends, you were getting double time or treble time. And, so when all my mates were earning, 30, 40 quid a week, I was earning 70, 80 quid a week. So I was quite well off. And when she offered me the job, the wages were £19 a week. And I
Right.
thought, Christ, how do you go from 70 or 80 quid a week to £19 a week? But I had a bit of savings, and I kind of bit the bullet, and I thought I'm maybe never going to get another chance. And I just sort of grabbed it. So within weeks, I was covering council meetings and Girl Guide displays and the local BB football team on a Saturday, and going interviewing the local councillor, who was a guy called Michael Martin in Springburn, who eventually became an MP, and ended up being the Speaker of the House of Commons. And he was a great guy to me. He really looked after me and would feed me stories and stuff like that. So it was a good training ground, because you were just kind of you could have gone to college and learned journalism and shorthand and all that kind of stuff. But of course, I'd been working in the building sites, and literally the first day I was on the job, the guy said, "Look, go up and see Mr. Scott MacArthur. He's just won £1,000 on the Spot the Ball contest in the Evening Times. He lives in Lomond Drive. Take a photographer and go up and find out what he's going to spend his money on." So literally half an hour later, I was knocking on your door, and my dog's barking, knocking on your door, and you would come to the door, and I kind of sweet talk my way into the house, and before you knew where you were, you and your wife were sort of posing for a picture, holding the check, and she was telling me that she was getting a new washing machine, and you were telling me that you were going to go for 2 weeks to Bognor Regis for your holidays. And it was great training. It was fantastic training. And then from there, Nina Young's husband at the time was a guy who was the deputy editor of the Sunday Mail, and they needed somebody to do the music column. They had a guy who did it. It was a great guy. I loved him. He was a guy called Scott Robinson. Lovely, lovely man. He was really good to me when I was kind of a young cub reporter, but he never went to any gigs. He was a kind of middle-aged man, in his mid-50s. He never went to any gigs, never bought any records, but he had the music page landed on his feet, and punk rock was coming in, and he didn't know who the Clash were or anything like that. So they decided they should maybe get somebody that was at least of the age group of the people that we were talking about. So they asked me if I would do the Sunday Mail, music column, and I did that once a week, and it was great. At that time, the Sunday Mail and the Daily Record were selling 800,000-900,000 copies every single day. So then I joined the Daily Record in 1983 in the staff, and I was there for, in total, I was there for something like 22, 25 years or something. It was great. It was fantastic.
Yes. Do you remember making that wee film with Talisman about the Apollo? Do you remember making that? You were on that.
No, I don't. Tell me about it and see if it springs something.
We did it was the guys from Talisman Scotland who are based in Fife, and they got Claire Grogan. They paid her a few quid. She was the only one that got paid, and then they went round interviewing mainly about you, me, and a few others. There was like Fish was on there, and Midure and Boys from Nazareth, and it's still available. It's about 2.5 hours long. But the reason I mentioned it was you were in your office at the Record when they interviewed you. I just remember watching that, Billy.
Well, I mean, I've got a great memory, but I don't remember that. But if you say I was there, I was there.
You were there. You were definitely there. So
it'd be good to see that. So if you find it, maybe send me the link. I'd like to see that. It'd be good.
See what we can do. On that. We have our ways. There's the next thing. There's a number of things about the Apollo that people have spoken about them so much, it's almost like a noise. No one understands it anymore. There's like stories about, a secret vault of video recordings, a huge stash of audio recordings. And I've said to you before, we've got a friend on here who runs this site called Rescued Recordings, and Jack McCaffrey and his mates have gathered something like 300 recordings from the Apollo. And, it's really amazing. The material still coming through. But one of the most common stories that everybody talks about is the visitors book. at the Apollo.
Yeah.
And there's a picture, Andy, is it Rod Stewart? I think it's Rod Stewart, or who was it?
Oh, I can't remember.
I think it's Rod Stewart with a few lasses round about him, and there's obviously some staff there, and one of them's holding this book, Billy. And
Yeah.
frequently folks say, has anybody seen this book? You have seen the book.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there was just one book or if there were several. I mean, I guess, you know, with the volume of people, there may have been several books, but the guy who was the manager of the Apollo when it kind of opened in 1973 was a great guy called Jan Tomasic, a real kind of larger than life character, and everybody loved him. He was great. You know, I mean, you know, if a band suddenly wanted, a prawn sandwich at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, he knew somebody in the Albany Hotel that could rustle one up and send it up to the room and so he was a great guy. So then the guy who kind of took over from him was another nice guy, a guy called Russell Gilchrist, who's still around to this day. He lives not far from me now. And the last time I saw Russell, which was maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, I went down to his house for a cup of tea, and there in the house he had the visitors book, and I mean it was like holding the Magna Carta or something like that. It was fantastic, you know. And what the good thing about the visitors book was that, you know, say you had a band like, let's say for talking sake, the Eagles, who famously supported Neil Young when he played at the Apollo. You know, a lot of them didn't just write their names, you know, best wishes, you know, Glenn Fry, or best wishes Neil Young, or whoever it was. Some of them did kind of illustrations and doodles and, you know, that kind of stuff, and put wee witty comments on it. And I mean, I sat for, must have been a couple of hours in his house with a cup of tea, you know, just looking through this visitors book, and it was just, I mean, everybody was in it. Bowie was in it, Roxy was in it, Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel, Paul McCartney and Wings, the Stones, because, you know, it became a kind of, you know, everybody wanted to sign the visitors book, and it's invaluable, you know, it's absolutely invaluable, and he still got it, because I think the Playhouse in Edinburgh had one, and then somebody kind of, it vanished one night, and then suddenly it was on sale online or something like that. Was one, but you know, the Apollo was a bit more kind of organized, and of course the other thing that I spoke to you about the other day was the famous Apollo trophies. You know, they became real collector's items, because the only way you could get one is if you sold out every single ticket for, I mean, if you sold every ticket bar 50 tickets, you didn't get one. You had to sell every single ticket. And of course there's stories of bands finding out they were 30 tickets off a sellout and sending the road crew in to buy up the tickets so they could qualify for one. And I mean, I'm really good pals with Steve Harley of Cockney Rebel, and I think he's got about 5 or 6 of them. And you know, they're prized possessions. They were bought from a place called the Trophy Centre in Holmes Street, just down off of Waterloo Street. So, you know, if you ran the local football team or you ran the local darts team, and it was your end of year, you know, prize giving, you know, whoever was the top goal scorer or whoever was the player of the year, you went down to the Trophy Centre and you bought a trophy. So the one that you can see on the right with the musical clef, that's like a sort of, that was what, no, I'll do it in reverse, sorry. The one on the left, the one in the left of the left-hand picture and the right-hand picture is just like an athlete, you know, a gold athlete holding a gold laurel wreath. Now, that was just probably something that the Trophy Centre had for, you know, the cross-country team, or, you know, who'd won the 100 metres or the 200 metres. You know, it wasn't specifically a music award, but they got them made up. And the gold figure you see holding the laurel wreath is, I've got it in front of me here at the house, and it says, the Apollo Glasgow presented to Ella Fitzgerald, Thursday the 11th of April 1974, sold right out. So there's the, and I bought that, it was on eBay, and I thought I was going to have to pay, you know, 200 or 300 quid to get it, because, you know, stuff like that doesn't really come up much, but I got it pretty cheap, and I was the only bidder. I was amazed. I thought, you know, through the roof, and there'd be folk kind of ripping each other's throats out trying to get it, but I was the only bidder. And I sent an email to the guy. It was from an estate sale in Las Vegas. An estate sale is a bit like a warrant sale, and it was an estate sale from some guy who was connected with one of the big casinos in the Strip in Las Vegas, and he was selling all his stuff. I don't know if he'd gone bust or he just needed money or whatever, and it was an estate sale. And I said to the guy in the email, I says, you know, what can you tell me about it? He says, all I can tell you is that it was part of his estate sale. I don't know how he got it. I don't know if he was connected with Ella Fitzgerald, but of course the Apollo Glasgow wouldn't mean anything to them. So that was how I got that one. The other one, which has got the musical clef on it, was from 1984. Congratulations, Howard Jones, on your sellout concert, the 20th of December, 1984. That's it. That's it there. How do you say it? Right, there you go. That way, I'm moving it the wrong way. And I bought that. There was an auction, a charity auction once in Edinburgh Playhouse.
Yeah.
And I think at the time I paid 250 quid for it, which was quite a lot of money. And a few years later, I was interviewing Howard Jones, and I don't know if you can see that, but I took it with me, and I got one of those silver pens, and I said, I'm going to ask you to sign something, but you're not getting it back. And he went, what is it? And I said, it's your Apollo trophy. And he said, I haven't seen that since the night it got presented to me in the dressing room. And he says, but I'm glad that it's found a good home. So that was Howard Jones's Apollo trophy. Then after that, because a lot of the bands, you know, some of the bands, you know, loved getting them, but a lot of the bands sort of didn't bother. So what they did after that, they got a small kind of like an earthenware jug, a bit like a little Toby jug thing with a stopper on the top of it, a blue kind of ceramic. And there was whiskey in it, and they took the view that if there was a ceramic jug with the Apollo and sold out on the front of it, and there was whiskey in it, you know, they wouldn't leave them lying. They'd want to take them away to drink the whiskey. So I managed to get one of them. I've got it somewhere in a box in here. I couldn't find it in time for the show, but I've got that as well. I'm a bit of a magpie, you know. I just sort of try and get things. I mean, I've got stuff here like there's a ticket for, you know, quite a famous gig in the 30th of April. I think it would be 1972, and it's the Upper Clyde Shipbuilders. Don't know if you can see that. And Donovan with Billy Connolly,
famous,
who was completely unknown. He was a compere, and it was Donovan, Gallagher and Lyle, Billy Connolly, and a group called Greenmantle. And the UCS, the Upper Clyde Shipbuilders guys, were on strike. Jimmy Reed and Jimmy Early and those guys, they were on strike. And this was to raise money for the fighting fund to try and keep the shipyard open. And as you can see, the ticket's 60 pence. So I've got that. I've got good stuff here. This is a ticket from the boxes, the 25th of February. I guess it must again be about 72, 73. And it's Elton John. And if you can see it, it's got Elton John's autograph on it. And it's also got there's Elton John's autograph there. Turn it upside down. You can see there's Elton John's autograph. And then the top autograph is Nigel Olsson, who's Elton John's drummer. So I've got that. There's a good ticket here. The 25th. It's the same gig. 50 pence to see Elton John. Jeez. Daylight robbery. Absolute daylight robbery. A bargain at the price. So I just sort of kept all these things. I mean, I've got this is Bowie, the stage shows in 78, where it was the white strip lights, you know, and he played all the electronic stuff that was off low, £6 to see Bowie. There's what else have I got here? There's Mick Ronson, when Mick Ronson went solo, when the Spiders from Mars split up, and when Slaughter in 10th Avenue came out, and that's the 17th of April, 74. So that was his first solo tour. Here's one thing. Here's a thing here, right? I went to see where are we? Let me see. I've got Alec Harvey, December, my all-time favourite Scottish band, the December the 16th, 1978, the Stalls. You can see that there. Alec Harvey. Yeah. And then, because I was working in the press at that time, there's the pass, there's a press pass.
Oh, brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
The press pass. And it's signed by a guy at the bottom. When it says signature, it's signed by a guy called Danny Henry, who was the head steward. He was a great guy. And that's the pass. And if you can see just above pass, it says circle. So that was to get me up in the circle to watch a gig. Here's a good one. Which was the Faces in 74.
Oh, aye.
That was a good one.
That'd be a good
one. The Faces 74. Here's one here. A good one. This is 79. The Jacksons.
All right, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the first time I'd ever seen Michael Jackson come on stage. He did that kind of robot body popping dance, and he hadn't quite unveiled the the moonwalk yet, but he did the kind of body popping almost as if he was in a telephone box and was trying to get out, and it was that. I bought these recently. I bought them because they don't come up very often, but they're in good condition. And I didn't go to these guys. One's the 6th of October 71, Yes, with Jonathan Swift, and then Bartley James Harvest in concert with Camel. So I bought these recently. I don't know if you can see them.
Yes, you really are.
That was just.
I kept everything. I've got all my ticket stubs, and here's a famous one, right? I had tickets to see this guy. I'd never heard of him, right? I'd never heard of him, and I bought the ticket, and it was 90p. And I was going down there with a mate of mine, and we were outside, and it was bedlam. It was absolute chaos outside. You know, the whole of Renfield Street was blocked, and the guy had come in on the 10th of November 72. He'd flown in from America, and they tried to ban him from coming into Britain. Mary Whitehouse and all these, MPs were saying that he was corrupting the nation's youth, and they weren't going to let him in Britain. They weren't going to give him a visa and all this kind of stuff. But he managed to come in. He stayed at the Central Hotel. He came in on the 10th of November, played the gig on the 10th of November, and the following day he flew out again. So I had a ticket. It was 90p. Didn't know much about him, but I thought I need to see what this was about. And then when I was standing in Renfield Street, if you came out of the Apollo and you went left, there used to be a big sort of electrical showroom on the corner of Sauchiehall Street and Renfield Street. And there was a couple of guys who had worked in the oil rigs. You know, those guys, 3 weeks on and 2 weeks off. They were always earning hundreds of pounds. Even back then, it was like a fortune. And a guy offered me £7.50 for my 90p ticket. And I was thinking, for £7.50, I could buy 3 albums and a single. Right. And I thought, I'm just going to cash in my chips. So I sold my ticket for £7.50. The guy counted me £7.50 in my hand. But my mate didn't sell his ticket. He went in. And then I went round to the door at Renfrew Street, one of the doors, almost where the front door of Cineworld is. And there was an exit door, and that was up in the balcony. And there was about 5 or 6 of us standing. We were here up against the door, and we could hear the crowd roaring, and we could hear the music. And this big sort of skinhead guy came up. He was a big sort of tough-looking guy. And he wanted in at the front, so we kind of all moved out the road to let him in because he looked pretty fearsome. And of course, the doors opened out the way for the fire regulations, so there was a sort of metal panel over the door, and he put his hand in the metal panel and pulled it, but it snapped shut again. And then he pulled it with both his hands, and the door opened out the way. And we all ran in. It was maybe about 20 of us all ran in. And because I knew the layout of the place, I knew to go in and run up. But they all ran down the stairs, and of course the stewards all got them and started beating them up. But as soon as I ran up the stairs, I was immediately in the upper boxes, and I just went in and stood in a box, and then I let it die down for 5 minutes, and then I went round and stood in the front of the circle, and it was this guy. Can you see that? Alice Cooper. Brilliant. The Divan's 9. And of course, it was a whole bit. There was that little sort of low. There was the stage was 5 foot high, and there was the lower down bit. And the show had all the stewards were up in the lower down stage fighting the audience back. And the stage was sort of done up like a kind of an alley in New York, and there was dustbins with like rubbish pouring out them and all that. And he had the snake, Eva Marie Snake. That was what the big boa constrictor. It was curled around his neck. And then he had the knife fight with the guy, and he stabs the guy to death. And they decide that he's got to go to the gallows. And then they put him up on the gallows, and put the noose around his neck. And the hangman pulled the gallows, and there he was dangling in midair. They'd hung Alice Cooper, and then that was the last song, and the stage went to black. And then about 5 minutes later, he came back on stage with a white top hat and a white tailcoat, and sung "Elected." That was a big single that came out, and I mean that was a game changer. You'd never seen anything like that before. It was one of the greatest things I've ever seen. I didn't really know the songs. It was Under My Wheels, and there was. School's Out, obviously, and there was Elected, and there was I'm 18, and he had the black eye makeup, and he had the big sort of leather codpiece thing, and it was incredible. You'd never seen, and I mean I've interviewed him a lot over the years. In fact, I worked for the Nordorf Robbins music therapy charity, and a few years ago we gave him an award to mark the 45th anniversary of it was 2017, I think it was. And I sat and interviewed him, and he remembered every single detail of that night, and says it was still a pivotal show. I've never ever found out to this day why he decided to come in and play Green's Playhouse in Glasgow when he could have gone to, the Rainbow Theatre in London, or, the Albert Hall, or one of the more prestigious venues south of the border. But I don't know what he'd heard about the Green's Playhouse, other than that the audience was nuts, and he decided to fly in, stayed at the Central Hotel down in Hope Street, did the show, flew back to America the next day, and the rest is history, as they say. It was fantastic, absolutely amazing.
Sorry, can I say I'd heard that he'd talked to David Bowie about where to play in the UK, and Bowie said, well, if you want to play somewhere good, play Glasgow.
Well, I remember, in the mid-70s, I think it was Melody Maker had a poll amongst, artists, and they actually put a bit of work into it, because they had people like Robert Plant and Brian Ferry and Steve Harley and Peter Gabriel and Roger Daltrey. So it wasn't just, people, who were doing in the Vauxhall Conference League. This was the Premier League they'd got in touch with, and they asked them, what would you say was the best gig in Britain? And 95% of them said Green's Playhouse stroke Glasgow Apollo, including Bowie, because I was lucky enough to interview him about 7 times over the years, and I have to say he was a very, very gracious and very nice and accommodating to me, and I miss him dearly because I was such a big fan. But he always talks about the Apollo, and of course, those famous shows at the start of 73, I think it was the 18th of January 73, the Ziggy Stardust show. And then he came back in May of 73 in what was essentially the Aladdin Sane stroke Ziggy Stardust show, because that was the tour where the last night was at Hammersmith Odeon, and he announced, not only is this the last show of the tour, it's the last show we'll ever do, and he killed off Ziggy Stardust to the astonishment of everybody in the band, apart from Mick Ronson. He was the only guy who was privy to what was going on. And I was working as a steward on that, on those second 2 shows, because the ticket sales were so crazy that they decided to add a matinee, and they had a matinee, I think it was at 6:30, and then they had the normal show at 9:00. So he did 2 shows in the one night, and I was working as a steward, as I said to you, with my little armband with steward on it, and I was at the stage door at the lane, and the limo came up, and there Bowie jumped out, this spaceman, and he burst through the door and almost knocked me over, kind of fell into my arms. And he had the kind of bright orange hair and the platform shoes, and he had this kind of black jumper on it with kind of sort of checkerboard thing. It's quite, you'll see it in a lot of the pictures. And they wanted me to show them where the dressing rooms were, so I got to escort them down the stairs, because in those days in the Green's Playhouse, the dressing rooms were underneath the stage.
Aye.
And I took him down there, and when you walked into this sort of dungeon underneath the stage, there were all the Ziggy Stardust costumes all hanging up in coat hangers on the wall. There was the sort of one that looked like the woodland creatures, and there was the big silk cape, and there was the one that was the kind of, it looked like the sort of knitted thing, with the stripy thing with the rings around his ankles and around his wrists. And of course, in those days, there was no such things as camera phones. I didn't have my little trusty Kodak Instamatic. Had I had it with me, I would have got a picture of me and Ziggy Stardust. But what I did get was there was a scrap of brown paper, and I had a pen, and I asked him to scribble his autograph, and he scribbled it on a piece of brown paper, which I still have in a box in the house somewhere. And then they went on and played 2 shows, one at 6:30 and one at 9:00, and it was you'd never see. This guy looks as if he'd come down from another planet. You could kind of almost identify with people like Robert Plant or Frankie Miller or Ian Hunter of Mott the Hoople, because they were guys in bands. But this was a guy who looked like a space alien. You'd never seen anybody like this ever before. He wasn't just handsome, he was beautiful. And he was on stage singing songs like Ziggy Stardust and Mooney's Daydream and Hang On to Yourself and The Width of a Circle and Space Oddity and All the Madmen and All the Young Dudes. It was mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing. I've never forgotten that. I'm getting goosebumps just talking to you. And I was lucky enough that I saw every Bowie show in Scotland since then. You know, the Serious Moonlight tour at Murrayfield, the Sound and Vision tour at, you know, Ingolston Arena. Saw him when he played the Barland in '97. And a great story about that. I know it's nothing really to do with Apollo, but I was in the dressing room after the Barland show in 1997, and it was a Monday. The gig was on a Monday. I think it was June. And there's two stories about it, which is great. He was doing the sound check, and as he was sound checking on the stage of the Barland, which is probably my second favourite concert venue in the world behind the Apollo, and as he was doing the sound check, one of the sort of plaster cast gold stars from the ceiling fell off the ceiling. I don't know if the noise had loosened it or something, or it was ready to fall, and it landed at his feet. And he took it home. It became a real prized possession, and he got it framed, and it was put up on the wall of his house in New York. So
Wow.
after the show in '97, I think it was June '97. It was a Monday night, and I was in the dressing room talking to him, and he was there with a kind of white towel and boxer's robe thing on, right? And I said, "When did you get here, David?" And he said, "I got here yesterday. You know, Sunday." And he was staying up at One Devonshire Gardens, you know, up in the West End of Glasgow, that really posh hotel. And I said, and the weather was glorious. It was just one of those beautiful summer's weeks, you know, where there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And he said, I said, "What did you do yesterday? When did you get?" He says, "Oh, we got here in the morning." He says, "We checked into the hotel and we had a spot of lunch and we read the papers." He says, "But then a man and I, his wife, decided to go a walk. So we walked down the terraces towards Byers Road." And I went, "You're kidding?" And he went, "No, we walked down the terraces." Now, at that time, I lived in a place called Belhaven Terrace West. So if you come out of One Devonshire Gardens and take a right and keep walking down the terraces, you come to Great Western Terrace, then you came to Belhaven Terrace West, which is where I lived, then you come to Belhaven Terrace, then you come to Kew Terrace, then you come to Grosvenor Terrace, and then you come to Oranmore, Byers Road and the Botanic Gardens. And he says, "Oh, we were walking down there and we were kind of peeking in the windows and all the high ceilings, and it looked amazing." And I said, "You must have walked past my house." I said, "I live in number 21. And he went, "Well," and it was funny because a couple of days later, my next door neighbour, had been letting somebody out. She had a visitor, she was one of her pals, and she was letting her out the big main door. And she looked at it and she thought, "That guy looks a bit like David Bowie. No, it can't be." And she shut the door and went back in, and it must have been him. It must have been him. So I said, "What did you do?" He says, "Well, we walked down to Byers Road to the corner where Oranmore is, at the corner of Byers Road and Great Western Road." He says, "And we crossed over to the Botanic Gardens, and you won't believe this, but it's 100% true." He said, "We got 2 ice creams from the ice cream van parked outside the gates of the Botanic Garden, and we went and sat in the grass and had our ice cream." And I said, "But you must have got murdered because, you know, it was a summer's day, and of course, as soon as a chink of sunlight comes out, everybody's taps off, and everybody's in the Botanic Gardens, lying sunbathing and drinking cans of lager and all that kind of stuff." I says, "You must have got murdered." He says, "No," he says, "a couple of people said hi, but they were really pretty cool." Then they came out of the Botanic Gardens, they walked back up Great Western Road, no security, no minders, nothing. Walked right up, crossed at the lights, and went back into One Devonshire Gardens. And if you were coming down in the number 6 from Drumchapel to East Kilbride, now at that time he had kind of the orange hair and a little kind of orange goatee beard. If you didn't notice him, I think you might have noticed a 6'1" Somalian supermodel in the middle of the that's what he did, and he kind of lived a fairly normal life because there was an artist he liked once upon a time, and he get the flight up from Heathrow one day and got a taxi from Glasgow Airport and went to the museum and art galleries at Kelvin Grove and looked at this art exhibition from some painter he loved, and then went for lunch and get the 5 o'clock flight back down to London, and nobody batted an eyelid. So there's a good story about David Bowie.
Great story. Thanks for sharing that. I've never heard anything like it. Never heard that before. We're over our time, but there's 2 things I need to ask you, Billy. One of the guys over on Facebook has said, "I was told a story about Billy Sloan who once took Engelbert Humperdinck for a game of darts in a bar in Glasgow South."
Absolutely.
Is that
Absolutely.
true? How did that happen?
I went to interview Engelbert Humperdinck, who's a lovely man, and he lives in Leicester. So me and the photographer drove down to Leicester, and we eventually found his house, and it was this big mansion. It looked like J.R. Ewing from Dallas's mansion in the TV series. And you went up and you pressed the buzzer and said, "Hi, it's Billy from the Sunday Mail or the Daily Record or whoever I worked for at the time, and they buzzed you in, and the door, the electronic gates opened, and we drove in to this big mansion, and it was amazing. You know, the manicured lawns, and it just looked, and it was a mansion that he'd bought in the 70s for like, you know, 850 grand or something. That was a lot of money, and it was now worth, you know, 5 million or something like that, right? And the people who were interviewing him before us were Hello Magazine, and they had taken like 4 hours to do the pictures for Hello Magazine. And by this time, he was getting a bit pissed off because, you know, much as he's a nice guy, 4 hours of posing for pictures was just a bit too much. So our photographer was a great guy called Alistair Devine, great photographer, but really quick. You know, he used to rehearse the picture. So if we were going to do Cliff Richard, he would come up and get me an hour early, and I would stand there, fold your arms, turn that way, look that way, right? And then, so when Cliff Richard came down, he'd say, could you just, he would get a piece of sandstone and put a cross and scrape a cross in the ground. So when Cliff Richard came down, he said, you're going to stand in that cross, could you fold your arms, could you turn to the side, could you just look over your shoulder? Click, 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 right? So, of course, Engelbert's son, who was his manager at the time, you know, knew that his dad was getting a bit pissed off with the people from Hello Magazine. And he said to Alistair, how long are you going to, what pictures do you want to do? And he says, I want to do a picture of him in front of the house on the lawn. He says, I want to do a picture of him in the house. He says, and there's a lovely field around the corner. He says, I want to do a picture of him in the field, and I want just one change of clothes, a change of jacket. And the guy said, how long will that take? And Alistair went, it'll take 6 minutes. And you just saw the guy looking at him as if to say, what a bullshitter this guy is. You know, what's he talking about? You know, the guy from Hello's taking 4 hours, and he's going to do his pictures in 6 minutes. Alistair did his 3 pictures in 6 minutes.
Gosh.
And Alistair's pictures were better than the guy from Hello. So in this mansion, you come out the side door of the mansion, and you walk maybe 150 feet, and there was a small sort of you think I'm making this up, there was a pub, a full-size pub called the Lady Hamilton,
right,
built in the grounds of the house. And when you walked in the right-hand door, you walked into the bar, and there was the bar with the optics and the stools and tables and, you know, the telly in the corner and all that. And then if you walked in the left-hand side, there was a lounge with a pool table and a dartboard and another telly and tables and chairs and all that kind of stuff. And he was a darts nut, and he played for. He was the captain of the Showbiz darts team. So everybody that came to interview him, he challenged them to a game at darts, and it was a tenner every time he challenged them, right? And what he did was he always won, of course. So what he did was he put all the tenners in a jar, and at the end of the year, you know, he'd built up, you know, 300 or 400 quid or something. Then he doubled it, and he gave it to the local. Is that it there?
Is that there, mate? Yeah.
Yeah, right. He doubled it, and he gave it to the local old age pensioners group, and it paid for their Christmas lunch at their pensioners club or something like that, right? So he challenged me to a game at darts, and he started off 501, and I started off 301 because, of course, he was a darts player. And we played darts. Now, I've never really played darts. I mean, I've played darts, but I'm not any good at it. And by sheer fluke, I beat him. And of course, he was just like, oh, yeah, it's the best 83. It's the best 83. And of course, his PR girl was trying to drag him away because he had other stuff. No, it's the best 83. And of course, he then equalised, and he won. And then he won the third game as he would, and he beat me 2-1, so he was all happy. So spin on about 18 months, he comes up to Glasgow to do a day of promo and interview him in the Corinthian in Ingram Street. And we're sitting in there, and we do the interview, and we have a cup of coffee and a sandwich and stuff. And he says, do you think this place will have a dartboard? And I said, no, it's a bit kind of cocktail bar and a bit upmarket. I can't see them having a dartboard or a pool table or anything like that. He says, I'd love a game at darts. And I went, let me make a call, right? So I phoned this guy. I'm not going to tell you who it was for a minute. I phoned this guy who owned a bar just off of Victoria Road in the south side of Glasgow. And I said, did you still get your dartboard? And he went, yeah. I says, is the pub busy? He says, no, there's maybe 6-8 people in it, all guys just sitting playing dominoes. And I says, it's empty. I says, right, I'm bringing Engelbert Humperdinck for a game at darts. And he went, that will be right. I says, I'll be there in 20 minutes. I says, I'm bringing Engelbert Humperdinck for a game at darts. So we just went out into Ingram Street. We jumped in a cab. We went over to Victoria Road. Just as you go up Victoria Road away from town, there's the railway. There's the railway on the right hand side. You go over the railway bridge. There's a wee kind of road there, and the bar was there. And it was a bar owned by Billy McNeill, the guy who used to be the captain and the manager of Celtic. Lovely man, lovely man. So I walk in with Engelbert Humperdinck. I've got great photographs of it. I walk in with Engelbert Humperdinck, and we played a game at darts. So of course, when word spread like wildfire, I don't know how they did it because nobody had a mobile phone. So suddenly there was 8 old guys sitting playing dominoes and reading the paper and reading the Racing Post to put a line on for the bookies. And within about 15 minutes, there was 60 people in the bar. I don't know where they came from. They must have been coming in by helicopter or something. And of course, right, I'll play you next night. So he played all these challenging matches against all these guys in Billy McNeill's bar. And at the end of it, we were supposed to go to a little old folks home in Kinning Park because there was some wee woman in there who was celebrating her 100th birthday, and she was a mad Engelbert Humperdinck fan, and they got in touch and they'd asked if he could come in and wish her a happy birthday. So we went in there, but we were a bit late because he'd spent all afternoon playing darts, but he went in and saw the wee woman and posed for pictures and had a bite of her birthday cake, and then there's a pub there. That's it, Billy McNeill's pub. And I played darts with Engelbert Humperdinck. A lovely man, great guy, lovely guy.
It's a great story. And I've got to end with this other picture. I mean, there's other stories we've just not got time now to go into, but there's another picture you sent me, and it's of a very fresh-faced young Billy Sloan with somebody there that I think most of us recognise. What was all this going on?
That is, if you look at the picture, left-hand side is glue sniffing, right-hand side is not glue sniffing. No, that was a great week in the history of the Apollo. It was the week of, I think it was the 14th, 15th, and 16th of September in 1973, and the Rolling Stones played 3 nights at the Apollo, completely sold out. You couldn't get a ticket for love nor money. And the support act was a great guy called Billy Preston, who played not only with the Stones, but he played with the Beatles. He was the keyboard player on the Let It Be album. In fact, when the Beatles played their last ever gig on the roof of the Apple building in Savile Row in London, the last time they ever played together, Billy Preston was the guy who was sitting playing the keyboards. And Billy Preston was a support man. He was a songwriter and a performer in his own right. And then after he played the support set, he came on and played keyboards with the Rolling Stones. But what was significant about I gave you the wrong date there. I said it was September. It's the 10th of May, the 11th of May, and the 12th of May, 1976. That September date I gave you was 73, was the first time I saw the Stones in Goat's Head suit. That was the first time I saw them. But I'm talking about May 10, 11, and 12, 1976, a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And the Wednesday, by sheer coincidence, was also the night of the European Cup final at Hampden, where Bayern Munich played, I think it was St Etienne or something like that. So you'd all these, football fans who'd come in from Munich in Germany, and all these St Etienne fans who'd come in from France. And for the first time ever, Glasgow District Council or Glasgow Corporation, whatever they were called back then, relaxed the licensing laws and let the pubs open to 4 o'clock in the morning. It had never been done before because you had something like, 90,000 football fans who'd all sort of migrated from Europe into Glasgow for the night. Plus you had all these Rolling Stones fans. And, the atmosphere in town was absolutely electric, as you can imagine. You'd all these, French guys and German guys and Rolling Stones fans. It was absolutely incredible. And put the picture back up again, because I've got that denim jacket with kind of, elasticated neck and elasticated wrists I bought from the Slack Shack at the bottom of Hope Street, just where almost at the junction of Hope Street and Argyle Street, and I had a pair of what you can't see. I shouldn't be telling you this, but I had a pair underneath the jacket. I had a pair of denim dungarees, denim dungarees, right? And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, and it's good it's not a full length shot, but underneath the flared denim dungarees, I had a pair of wooden clogs.
Oh,
now, when I say wooden clogs, I'm talking about wooden clogs that you would see with the Dutch national costume. They were carved out of solid wood, and I bought them in Liberty in London, and then you couldn't actually walk in them. I mean, it was like desperate. I mean, try to run. I used to run for the bus with them under my arm, and folk would be sitting in the bus in Cathedral Street as I was running for the 16 to go back to Springburn. Going, what's this guy doing? But I thought I looked amazing. I thought I was a fashion, innovator. And at the end of the Stones gig, they were waiting for their limos or their buses, because I think they were staying at the Turnberry Hotel down in Turnberry, away down in Ayrshire. And the stage door opened in the lane, and out stepped Keith Richards, who looked just incredible, with his big silk scarf around his neck, and he had a denim jacket on, but his was 100 times better than me. He certainly didn't have a pair of Dutch wooden clogs on like the Dutch National Conference. And I got his autograph, which I've still got, because on the seats they gave these kind of little folders. I think I can't remember what album they were promoting at the time, but they put a folder on each of the seats, and I kept my folder, and he signed the folder, and I got a picture with him on my little Kodak Instamatic. A lot of people, the older people, when you bought a Kodak Instamatic, and you bought these things called Magic Cubes, there was 3 in a box, and they were 4-sided. You put the cube in the box and took a picture, and the cube turned and took another picture. And then sometimes the cube turned and it didn't go off, and you were like, oh, Jesus Christ. So I had my little Kodak Instamatic with my Magic Cubes, and I asked somebody to take the picture. And that was me and Keith. And I've since got to interview him a couple of times. And I mean, he's sitting in a room with Mick Jagger, he's sitting in a room with Keith Richards, or he's sitting in a room with David Bowie or McCartney or Rod Stewart or Elton John or Bruce Springsteen or Tina Turner or Paul Simon or Neil Diamond or Tom Jones or Ray Davies or Jerry Lee Lewis or Little Richard. I know I'm blatantly name dropping, but I mean, these guys never just made records, they made history. So if you're a music fan like me, which started on that night on the 21st of October 1971, 85 pence, Green's Playhouse in Glasgow, it doesn't get any better than that. You're sitting in a room with Little Richard, you're sitting in a room with Jerry Lee Lewis, you're sitting in a room with the guy who wrote God Only Knows, Brian Wilson. I mean, it's mind blowing. You're sitting in a room with the 2 guys who wrote Sympathy for the Devil. It's mind blowing, and that stems back to that night. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you at this moment in time. If I'd have decided to get into football or get into cars or something, which I know nothing about, but it was music for me, and it all started in Green's Playhouse, stroke the Apollo, because as I was saying to you the other day, the other thing about the place was that everything about the Apollo was wrong. Every single thing about the Apollo was wrong. The sight lines were wrong. If you were in the stalls in seat C31 and 32, the band were 25 feet high up on that stage, so you were looking up Roger Daltrey's nose. He was looking out onto the front row of the circle because it was a cinema. The place was falling apart. It didn't really have any facilities. You couldn't get a hot dog. You couldn't get a decent drink. You couldn't really get... you were lucky to maybe get a carton of ice cream if you were lucky. It never really had any facilities. But what it did have was it had a magic, and it had an incredible audience, because there's that old, song, New York, New York. If you can make it there, you'll make it anywhere. And, the Apollo audience could spot a fake a mile away. They could spot a fake a mile away. Absolutely. And, if you could win that audience over, you were the real deal. I mean, here's a great example. I've got my little Stewart's armband on. It's 1973. Nobody was interested in the support act. We just wanted to see the headliner. We didn't care about the support act. And it was Slade in 73. And dying to see Slade, Noddy Holder and Jim Lee and Dave Hill and Don Powell. Brilliant. And they were a huge band in the Apollo. They played there loads of times. And a big male audience. There was probably about 85% of the audience were guys, as opposed to 15% of the audience who were female. So it was a big kind of guy thing, right? And the lights went down, and it was the support act, whoever it was, and everybody booing. Nobody was interested, right? And this guy walked on stage, and he was like a man as opposed to a youth. You could see that he was a bit older than your average rock star. And he walked on stage, and he had a burgundy velvet smoking jacket on, which immediately got up the noses of the audience, right? Because he just looked ridiculous, right? And he went up and he put his foot up in the monitor, and he had a teacher's cane which he bent, like a teacher's cane, like you'd see the teacher in the Bash Street Kids would have, right? And he looked up and he just looked out at the audience and he glared at them, right? So that was like a red rag to a bull. If you can imagine 3,500 people, and I don't want to use bad language on your lovely, live stream, but I've never heard abuse like it in all my life. I've never heard abuse like it. I mean, the noise was deafening. So then he walked to the back of the stage and he took the smoking jacket off. And I was always impressed with this. Instead of throwing it down, he folded it and laid it down. I was always impressed with that. And then he got a can of, the older people will know, it was a green can of McEwen's Pale Ale. And there wasn't any ring pulls in those. There wasn't any ring pulls in those days. He got a little sort of metal thing where he punched a hole at both sides because you had to get 2 holes for it to come out. And he didn't drink it. He poured it in his hands, and he put it, and he got a comb, and he combed his hair back, and then he took a slug of it, right, and then he put this black leather jacket on, and he had a black and white stripy T-shirt, and he went back up to the monitor. And he put his foot up and he started bending the teacher's cane again. Now, by this time, from the moment he walked on right at the start to this point was maybe about 90 seconds. And that's a long time to be on that stage if you're not really doing anything. And if you can imagine what the crescendo of abuse was like, shouting and ball. I've never heard a racket like it in my life. And he just glared at the audience and went, "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let me introduce you to my band, the sensational Alex Harvey Band." And somebody somewhere, I don't know how they did it, if there's a musician listening to this, they could be able to tell. Somebody somewhere pressed the button and went do 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 do, and the band came on one by one. There was Ted McKenna behind the drum kit. Hugh McKenna had a big kind of floppy hat and a kind of big loose blouse thing on. Chris Glenn came on with the blue sort of jumpsuit with a big blue leather codpiece. Zal Clemenson came on with the white face and the green sort of clown costume and the curly hair. And they went straight into the Faith Healer. And I thought, what the fuck is this? What? I'd never seen anything like it in my life. So think of the abuse that he was getting before he introduced the band. They went down such a storm, they could have got an encore, slated to delay going on by about 20 minutes, half an hour, because it was so mental. And the next day, I went out up to Listen Records in Cambridge Street, which doesn't sadly exist any longer, and I bought the next album on the strength of the picture of him in the back cover, sitting with his Barathea blazer on, with the hair slicked back, drinking a can of lager. And I've been a fan ever since. They are my all-time favourite Scottish band, and I just loved them. And then of course you had the famous Christmas shows of 1975, which were just amazing, and then he came back with his solo thing and he played there, and it was I just loved him, and I miss him because I got to know him a bit, and he was a great guy and an incredible talent. I mean, if he'd still been around in 2021, he'd have been making great records and writing great songs and still be a real major force in the music business in Scotland. I'm sure of that.
Well, there's a certain symmetry in finishing with Alex Harvey because he's obviously one of the people that everybody remembers. And poor Andy and I were too blinking young to see him. We didn't quite get to see Alex, did we?
John Henry just said I also remember Alex threatening the Slade fans. That sounds like. But the thing about the Alex Harvey band was, they were the kind of band that, they looked so fearsome that if you'd met them down a lane somewhere just off Renfield Street at 4 o'clock in the morning, you'd have been absolutely terrified. But instead of beating you up, they'd have probably put a kind of collective arm around your shoulders and made sure you got a taxi up the road and got home safely to your mammy. So, this whole Vambo rules okay thing was just a big sort of act. He was the first guy, and he did it at the Apollo, and he also did it at the Usher Hall. He was the first guy the first pop star I ever heard talking about saving the planet and conservation on a stage. I mean, years before Peter Gabriel and Sting were doing all that stuff, he said, "Don't piss in the water supply. Vambo never vandal be. Vambo never cut down tree. Vambo from the future borrow. He lead children of tomorrow. Vambo coming to the rescue." I mean, that was his mantra, and he was the first guy that ever said, "The planet's a great thing. Don't mess it up." long before any of the trendies did it, and he did it a whole lot better.
Billy, that's been fantastic. Thank you very much. You've gone half an hour over the time you said you would give us, so we're really, really grateful for that, mate. Thanks ever so much for being on the show. There's loads of other stories, I know there is, because I've heard some of them. So maybe sometime you can come back on again, Billy.
I'd love to come back and listen. Your website's really good. I use it a lot for kind of looking up dates and stuff like that, and just to look on. Man. And I always like looking at the pictures and all that. The only thing about Andy, right? I said this to Scott the other day. All this, right? You know, who played, right? There's who played when. All the dates come up, and then there's who played, right? So if you go to the letter T, it's the Who.
I know.
The Jam. It should be G. The Jam should be under J. The Police should be under P. Bass City Rollers should be under B. The Who should be under W. Get that fixed, man.
I'll take that as user feedback. And
get that fixed, because I'm right. I've written to my MP. I'm not happy about this. I've written to my MP, and I'm just waiting to find back.
I think it's only been up like 17 years, so you're the first person to actually talk about it.
But it's been annoying me for 17 years, so this is the first chance I've got to tell you. It's really been bugging me for 17 years. So
I'll get the development team right onto it.
The Who should be under W, and the Police should be under P, and the Jam should be under J. It's that simple.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try.
But no, it's a great website, guys. You know, keep the stuff coming, and I love looking at all the photos, and you know. There isn't another venue, you know, you can go around the world and talk to somebody at a gig, and, you know, I've been to gigs in Madison Square Garden and big stadiums in America, and they've been great, they've been fantastic, don't get me wrong, but they don't even come close. They don't even come close to walking through that door in Renfield Street next to Mr. Chips on the right-hand side, and what was it, the West End Misfits on the left-hand side if you wanted to go and get measured for some kind of dinner suit. They don't. Madison Square Garden's brilliant, but it doesn't compare to walking through the Apollo, down the It's Good It's Green's carpet, going down into the TARDIS, sitting in seats C31, 32. Life changing, absolutely life changing. I mean, the course of my life would have been so different if I hadn't gone to see the Who on the 21st of October, 1971, 85 pence, a life changer.
Billy,
thanks, man.
Thank you very, very much being on the show. It's been brilliant, as you can see. Folk have really enjoyed it. It's been terrific, mate. Thank you from me and Andy. It's been just a real pleasure listening to your stories. You're a good storyteller, mate.
And good luck, and keep the website going. It's really great. I really like it.
Okay. Good night. We'll see you again.
Thanks, Billy.
Well, guys, how good was that, mate? That went all right, didn't it? That was excellent.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, it was great. Really good. Great stories, and I really appreciate that. That was great. I know Billy can still hear us. It was brilliant, Billy. Thank you. So,
Thank you, Billy.
rather than who played this week, look at the time. It's near 11 o'clock. I think we'll maybe drop that and do a big one next week. But there's 2 or 3 things just like to update you on, guys. The tickets for our get-together in December are flying out. We're over 50 tickets now. There's only about 15 tickets left. So if you are hoping to join Lauders in December, you need to get your finger out and go and get a ticket from the Eventbrite site. And I think I've got the caption here. Yeah, I have. And you'll probably tell me I need to put it in the chat. You'll probably tell me that, wouldn't you? But anyway, it's there. It's
anymore. You know.
I should know. But it'd be great to see you there. You need to buy a ticket if you want to come, though, because it is going to sell out. I'm speaking to Lauders next week about getting more tickets, because I reckon we can sell the whole place out. I'm not sure they'll give us it all, but we'll do our best on that. So that's brilliant. So I'm still going to play a bit of music, mate. I reckon we need to play a bit of music to finish. And one of the shows that Andy and I were at this month in 1982 was the absolutely fantastic AC/DC at the Glasgow Apollo. I mean, AC/DC at the Glasgow Apollo. It's funny what Billy was saying. I mean, I remember, because I went to university in Edinburgh, and I remember going to the Apollo to see them on this tour, then going to the Playhouse to see them on the same tour. The Apollo gig was out of this world. The Playhouse gig was okay. It was a good gig. It was still AC/DC, but the difference in the atmosphere was absolutely tangible. And this is a track we've not played before. I think we've only played Hell's Bells, I think, before from this gig. But this is one of the one of my favourite Rescued recordings. And shout out again to Jack McCaffrey and the guys over there at Rescued Recordings. What a job you're doing, guys. And this is a show we've talked about before, Goosebumps all round, and this is AC/DC doing one of their hit singles, which is You Shoot Me All Night Long. Fantastic riff. possibly be 40 years ago. God,
Well, it's not. It's only
Yes.
39. It's only 39.
absolutely brilliant.
See the thing about that song?
Yeah.
That is, it just goes to show that the person who's singing the song also has trouble singing that song.
An
'Cause
easy song to sing. Yeah.
that's a hard song to sing. That is a
Yeah.
hard song to sing. And that's the first time I've ever heard Angus Young make a tiny, tiny wee mistake.
There was a bit, wasn't there? Aye. It's not,
Yeah,
but
tiny wee mistake.
as Tom Russell
Brilliant.
said,
I loved it. It was great.
as Tom Russell said, it
Yep.
was authentic, mate. It was authentic.
It was definitely authentic.
Authentic.
But I was see when Billy was talking about the Who gig and all that. If you just transplant the Who for me
Aye,
with AC/DC
same thing.
and add
Yeah.
cannons, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
You know. Add cannons and plaster.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
it was. It's the same feeling. You know. Yeah.
Right.
Great.
It was lovely. So, guys, we hope you enjoyed that. There was a good audience tonight. It was great to see everybody. We're having an after show as always tonight. The address is on the screen, and no doubt Andy will put it in the chat, or somebody will, but it's at the top of the Facebook group as we speak. And it'd be great to see you there, and we can chat about that show. We know Billy is quite I think a polarizing character with some people from what he was like when he was younger, so it'd be quite interesting to join us and have a chat about that. But I thought he was great tonight. I really did. I really enjoyed it. It was excellent, and cannot fault the guy tonight. He was absolutely brilliant. So thanks for tuning in. My name is Scott MacArthur.
My name is Andy Muir.
And we will see you next
Good night.
week. And hopefully, we'll have an update on the Lauders event. What I'm going to be doing the day before the Lauders event. We're still working on that. And hopefully I can get some videos done of some of your Apollo autobiographies, because we're really keen to get them. So good night all. See you on the Zoom.